Today, learn why busy lunch can be your least profitable hours and how a single cut could save cash without hurting sales. Discover 2 metrics that expose overstaffed blocks in seconds, sales per labor hour and RevPash, and master a 5-minute daily daypart check that assigns labor, targets a product mix, and can unlock $2,000 or $3,000 in monthly profit leaks. Hello and welcome to the Bar Business Podcast, where we help bar owners increase profits, attract loyal guests, and simplify operations so you can avoid burnout and finally enjoy your life outside of your bar. I'm your host, Chris Schneider, the Bar Business Coach. So today on the Bar Business Podcast, we are going to talk about separating what is busy from what is profitable. We're going to be talking about how to really analyze your sales mix by day part and how to use sales per labor hour and RevPash to right-size your labor very quickly. And so to do this, we're going to walk through a process where we separate the day into 4 day parts, then pull 30 days, the last 30 days of POS data, and then run some quick math that's going to allow us to do this analysis. And so I know this sounds sometimes a bit foreboding or difficult for folks when we're thinking about running complex financial analysis and all these different KPIs and metrics and all of that. But we're going to get through this podcast episode in less than 10 minutes. And I guarantee you, if you run with this procedure, you should be able to do the entire analysis in about 30 minutes to an hour max. So the important thing here is there are 3 numbers that we really want to look at and that we really need. And the first thing we're going to look at is sales by day part. So to find your sales by day part, we want to export from our POS system our hourly sales for the last 30 days. And then we're going to take those hours and sum them up into 4 buckets. Now, what are our buckets for day part? Now, these are just recommended. Depending on your exact bar and your hours, what your traffic flow is, you may change these, but these are what I like to go to as kind of the 4 generic day part buckets. And that would be lunch. So generally looking like 11 to 3, happy hour, kind of talking 3 to 6, 3 to 7, depending on your market and when people have dinner. Prime, which we'll call 7 to 11, generally speaking, and late night, which would be 11 to close. Now, obviously your hours, your traffic flow, how people behave in your market may move those a little bit. But the idea here is we want 4 buckets, assuming you're open, from lunch through late night. And we want to kind of do that lunch, happy hour, prime, late night categorization. Now, before we look at anything else, one thing I always like to look at is to look at weekday versus weekend patterns and kind of get a feel for how do my sales fluctuate. And within that, you can also look at, is there a percentage of that day where it fluctuates? So what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is if we see that lunch is, 25% of your sales on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, but on Saturday and Sunday, lunch only makes up 5% of your sales, then we have an idea, okay, lunch is way more crucial for our business potentially during the week than on the weekend. Now, we don't exactly know that yet, but what we do have an idea of at this point is, where are our sales coming from? Now what we want to pull is our labor costs by day part. So we're going to look at who was on the clock when and what do we pay them? And so in doing this, we're going to bucket our labor into those same categories. So again, lunch, happy hour, prime or dinner type time period, and then late night. And by doing that, now we have our sales by day part. We have our labor by day part. And so if we just take sales and divide it by labor hours, we know sales per labor hour by day part. Now, when it comes to RevPash by day part, so that's revenue per available seat hour, it's actually quite a bit easier. So RevPash is something that scares a lot of people, but I find it to be a very easy way to understand what revenue am I getting in the door on just a normalized basis. So to calculate RevPash, it's revenue per available seat hour. What we're going to do is we're going to take the revenue for that period. So for that day part, we're going to look at how many seats are in my bar and how many hours are in that day part. So you multiply the number of seats you have by the number of hours. So say we're looking at lunch, that's 11 to 3. Let's say that's 4 hours. So we'll take 4 times the number of seats you have. So if you have 100 seats, it's 400, 4 hours and 100 seats. Then we're going to take the revenue we had and divide it by that. So if you had, I don't know, $800 in revenue and 400 seat hours for lunch, you would come up with $2 of revenue per available seat hour. And again, the reason why I like RevPash is because it's going to normalize, right? So I know, well, during lunch it was 2, maybe during our prime period it's 7. So now I know, hey, a seat is worth $4 to me during lunch, but it's worth $7 to me during our prime period. And so we're going to do all of this to give us a understanding of what each day part is contributing to our business. Now we're going to do a $5 5-minute analysis. And so we're going to calculate our sales per labor hour. We're going to calculate our RevPash. And really, if you do this on a daily basis, it only takes 5 minutes. It's going to take a little bit longer to set up that historical. And then you're going to be able to see these patterns in your business. From that, you should be able to understand when is my labor higher and lower, right? Sales per labor hour is going to give you an indication of when your labor is higher or lower in relation to your sales. And RevPash is going to give you an indication of how much money am I generating on just a very normalized basis that you can then use to say, okay, what is worth more money to me? Because let's be honest, a late night Friday guest is quite different than a Sunday afternoon guest, is quite different than a Wednesday lunch guest. And what they spend, how they spend, what they purchase is always going to be different. So once we have that data, we can look at essentially 3 immediate actions that you can use to improve your business. So the first one is right-sizing your labor. If we look at lunch and we say, okay, on Tuesday lunch, I have sales per labor hour of $95. And on, I don't know, Friday prime, I have sales per labor hour of $250. Well, we're going to say, okay, I'm doing a lot better with my labor on Friday night than Tuesday lunch. Now, for some bars, especially smaller bars, that's just part of the business because you only have 1 or 2 people working lunch, so you really can't cut labor. But if you do all this analysis and you go, wait, I have 3 people working on Tuesday lunch and they're only generating $100 per labor hour, and I have 5 people working on Friday night and they're generating $250 per labor hour. Well, maybe I can cut one of those people off Tuesday lunch. And maybe, depending upon are we at capacity or not with our ability to serve, are we able to serve all the guests coming in the door Friday night? Maybe I need to take one of those folks from Tuesday day and put them on Friday night. So by doing this analysis, you really can understand where your labor is effective and where it isn't. And then it helps you to balance your labor across days to ensure that you're getting the best out of your employees and using them the most efficient way possible for your business. The second thing I would look at is adjusting your menu by day part. So we want to make sure that when we're busy, we're pushing our high margin items, right? Sometimes happy hour, you might run it too late and it's running into that dinner period. And when that dinner or prime period is doing a lot of business, maybe you don't want to offer those deals then. Maybe during lunch, you want to highlight a deal to try to drive in more business, or you want to change what your lunch offerings are to raise that RevPash a little bit. And then the third thing we're going to look at is strategic hour evaluation. So are there day parts where you consistently have a very low sales per labor hour? And if there are, is it worth being open those hours? Or maybe you have really high sales per labor hour on the last hour you're open on Wednesday. Well, maybe it's worth staying open an hour later if you can legally and seeing if that will continue. So when you understand or what people are spending in your bar when, you can adjust your hours to match what your customers are telling you by their dollar. So to wrap us all up for today, what most bars will find when they do this analysis is that one day part, maybe 2, are subsidizing the rest of the time that you're open. If you do this every day, you can monitor these changes, track them, optimize your hours, optimize your staffing, and optimize your specials and your offerings in order to squeeze out a little more revenue without actually impacting your guest experience, and by giving you a strategic way to dictate what you sell. That about wraps it up for today. If you enjoyed today's insights, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a review. If you are ready to take your bar to the next level, schedule a strategy session with me by clicking the link in the show notes below. Until next time, have a great day, and we will talk again later.